peripheral the destiny is that you can only offer natural resources for exploitation. And so therefore we are getting there. So from semi-peripheral countries, we are getting more and more into periphery, since obviously services that we could offer being sucked in by rich countries, especially Germany. What can you do as a young person here? You can maybe work for a call center that been obviously delocalized from Germany or France or UK here. If you're an IT master, you can also obviously join the global economy, getting untaxed money here and spend it here. Those are the better destinies.
Hello, is it okay now?
Or you can basically move to these rich countries. Now, the problems with the exploitation of natural resources is that this is everything you can offer to world economy. So what Balkans could offer now to the world economy, apart from this tiny fraction that could get jobs by staying here, say, is of course exploitation of rivers, of woods, of minerals. You are witnessing across the Balkans this whole craziness and drive to build small hydroelectric plants and so on. So basically use the rivers that Balkans still have to produce energy. And that already had enormous ecological consequences, and luckily people started to fight against it. You might be aware of what basically shook the regime, the current Serbian regime, was so-called the Rio Tinto, so the big Australian-American corporation that discovered in Serbia a very important mineral, namely lithium, and that got all the permission to start exploitation of these minerals in Western Serbia that would devastate that region. So what happened is that people rebel, and this was the first time when this current regime showed the weakness. Now, can we stop it just by protesting? How can we be placed in the global economy, and at the same time, of course, preserve nature and try to figure out the ways of stopping people emigrating? So it is important to keep in mind this sort of shift to the peripheral destiny in the world economy. We'll come to that, how could we fight against it and whether this will be successful. In the remaining 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, I will try, of course, to tackle even more the question of youth and education, since I've been educator here myself. Obviously, the question is, 10 years ago, the student movement organized the occupation of university in Croatia. And that was seen as the beginning of what we call here the new left in the Balkans. Yeah? The new left that is having, that is kind of joining hands with these type of movements in Spain, in America, across the world, in the wake of after the financial crisis of 2008. The demand was simple: stop the commercialization of higher education. Education must be free. Yeah? Or education is already paid by the taxes. Education must be public. So they fought and managed to get many concessions. After that, the student movement developed also in Ljubljana, in Skopje, in Belgrade, and so on. These students will join hands with the movements fighting for the commons, especially urban commons, fighting against the gentrification and the devastation of urban space, and then devastation of nature. And all of that through 10 years will result in some significant political gains for a new player on our scene that we call the New Left. The New Left entered the parliament in Slovenia. The New Left elected a mayor of Zagreb, a major thing, a major city last year. And now it's modestly showing some gains in Serbia itself, that after 30 years is having an actor that at least is trying to offer a different perspective on how to run society. Now, the problem with education is that in the meantime, there's no point in kind of fighting for a free education any longer, and we don't have a strong student movement. The problem is that we got a reduced number of students, and that most places at state universities are for free and remain unfulfilled, remain empty. Therefore, even if once you have the money to fund education, obviously you are not going to have enough students. The problem, of course, is of bad demography, and on the other hand, of exile. People who are seeing their destiny somewhere outside of the region. And now, someone who lived in the exile, I have to say certain things. It is true that for the most of the youth in the Balkans, the situation is dire and difficult. On the other hand, there's something which I would call, complexities of exile. People are moved to go to Ireland or Germany, especially if they have, say, Croatian passport, are moved by a prospect of better life. And of course, who could blame them? They are right. The question is whether that better life will come. And of course, what do you lose when you move out? And of course, I'm not saying this in order to convince you not to move out from the Balkans. I did it myself. But simply to be aware, again, in what type of destiny you go, moved and guided by the idea that somewhere else life is much better, or at least you're going to live in a normal country. When it comes to administration and so on, maybe even politics, that might be the case. The problem is, of course, that once you move, you lose something what Pierre Bourdieu called famously cultural capital and social capital. Your diploma from some godforsaken university in the Balkans doesn't mean anything. Extraordinary intelligent people become waiters or become, basically taxi drivers. That doesn't mean anything that you are an engineer or that you got a degree in languages, let alone in literature or philosophy. You lose this. You lose also social network that you build throughout your life. And social networks are the people is also knowing where to knock on the doors in order to do something. So you get an extraordinary reduced life, and that's the life of refugees, of exiles, or emigrants, or immigrants, whatever you want to call them. So therefore, you have to be really, really motivated in order to fight for 3, 4, 5 years in order to get to the level where you might live a dignified life. So although many people are jealous or envious of those who manage to leave the Balkans, I'm not. In this respect, I understand through what kind of ordeal they'll have to go in order to live under better circumstances, or in order to achieve a certain life they would like to live. Now, obviously, the dreams cannot be always fulfilled. And once you leave, and after that, you lose contacts with the former countries, and then the whole and classical thing that's been described in literature starts, which is, of course, not finding your place in the world, or is as Edward Said would say, being out of place. So our destiny is being out of place. Now, going from personal to back to the topic of our discussion, the question is, of course, how things will develop. So I'll offer 3 scenarios, and then we can further discuss it. Now, one would be, of course, that we get more of the same, which means the deterioration of the situation we have is going to get worse. More of the same means worse because of the trends we also mentioned here. The second scenario, that we go more into Latin American mood of peripheral countries that do have interesting cities and very smart and educated urban population, but whose economy is dependent. And it's also depending on extractivism, as I said, exploitation of mineral resources or the richness of the country. It usually creates a very unstable situation, very unstable class position, a very unstable political climate that often results in dictatorships or civil wars or unrests or breakdowns of the system every 20, 30 years. Just look at Argentina.